Hi. Good morning, everyone. Are you looking forward to today? Good. Well, I'm going to be talking about resurrecting the dead. And as you see, Tales of an Accidental Maintainer. Now you may wonder, what is an accidental maintainer? Well, these are just two projects for which I became an accidental maintainer. And luckily, in both cases, I'm not alone in it. But these were projects which were abandoned, or effectively abandoned, by the original maintainer, but they were widely used or critical to other projects. So how does this typically happen? How do you become an accidental maintainer? Well, typically, it starts with my CI failing. So either I'm already running on PHP 8.4, my CI is failing because linting was failing, or because my tests are failing because the dependency isn't ready. So I go in and create a patch. The patch does not pass CI of the dependency because it's not being maintained. So I go in and fix the CI, and that normally takes about 5 patches. Quite often they're still on Travis, and you need to move it to GitHub Actions and do all the other things. And then it's waiting game, and we wait, and wait, and wait. Oh, okay. That's okay. We wait, and at some point, depending on what project it is, there might get community pressure. People start whining, like, can this patch please be merged? And yeah, if that waiting takes too long, at some point you take over. I never intended to become a maintainer of these projects. Some of these, I barely ever looked at the code at all. I don't actually know the code base of these projects, but I am the maintainer now. Not because I want to, but someone needs to do it, and there was no one else. And the latest in this list. Now, is there anyone here who's never heard of PHP Code Sniffer? I see 1 hand, 2 hands, 3 hands, 4. Okay. In the PHP world, and you're all from the PHP world, aren't you? There's basically 2 tools for checking code style: CS Fixer and PHP Code Sniffer. And PHP Code Sniffer is the biggest of the 2. And CS Fixer basically can do a subset of what Code Sniffer can do. Code Sniffer does both fixing, but also can flag things which can't be auto-fixed. So it can do things like PHPCompatibility checks and flag codes before you run tests on them, or if you don't have tests, which happens. So yeah, I took over Code Sniffer. And this one is slightly different from the other ones. I'd actually been an established contributor for about 7 years already. I got in commit rights earlier the year. The intention was still to maintain it together with the original maintainer, to get them to transfer a lot of knowledge to me. They never did, and sort of 6 months in after I got commit rights, and we were supposed to have meetings and they never happened, the maintainer came back and said, I'm quitting. And I was like, okay, so this is a project with over 200 million installs, with 5 million downloads a month. This is too big to fail. We can't abandon this. And there was no one else to take over. I had other plans, I had other commitments, I had customers, and suddenly this happened. Now, how does something like this happen? Because this doesn't, it's not a rare thing. It's something which happens in more projects, not just Code Sniffer. So how does it happen? Basically, projects start and everyone is enthusiastic, and it's a new thing, and maybe it's just a small thing you want to try out. It's a learning exercise. And maybe you abandon it straight away because you've learned what you needed to learn. But some projects then get popular, and they mature, and they get a lot of users. And that mature state is, when a project gets maintained and stays maintained, and that's a good thing. And then sometimes you go to the next stage, which is zombie. And it's fine for projects to switch between the mature state and the zombie state. Things happen, sometimes things slow down a little, you lose interest a bit, but then you go back to it. It's okay to switch between mature and zombie state for a bit. Preferably the second state is the best state, though. And yeah, if you're unlucky, the project dies. Now, there are quite a few reasons for abandoning a project, but the reality is there's only one real reason. Life happens. And that can take a lot of forms. Their personal circumstances change. Someone might get kids, or elderly parents need taken care of. You might get ill, or this is where we are now. A lot of maintainers in 10, 15 years will reach pension age and will want to slow down or maybe stop. This is a natural thing, and we need to take that into account, and that's a good thing. But don't think, this is a faraway future, this is something which happens to other projects, because that's not the case. Another project which I co-maintain started with 2 maintainers, and then I joined 3 maintainers, which is a healthy situation. But now we're back to 2. Because one of the other 2 people has been diagnosed with a brain tumor. And they're terminal. This is not going to be cured. They are dying. And what scares me most about this, aside from the personal tragedy which is happening, is that the only reason I know about it is because the other 2 maintainers know each other in person, and we have off GitHub contact. Because this is not something you post in an issue. Oh, by the way, people, I need to abandon the project because I have a brain tumor. You don't do that. So the type of contact we often have with open source maintainers on GitHub, via issues, via PRs, is not the type of contact in which this kind of information gets conveyed. So you might not even know that the project is effectively abandoned while it is. And one thing I want to highlight here is maintainer burnout. Mental health problems are a thing. This is real. And one of the typical things when a maintainer says, okay, I'm struggling with work-life balance, I'm struggling with maintaining my mental health, I need to basically spend less time on customer work, and I need to spend more time on the open source project to balance it out, so I need money to do that. And then companies say, okay, I hear help. Let's put people on it. So they put people who've never contributed to the project on the project full-time. And yes, this happened to CodeSniffer too. People who've never contributed, so low-quality PRs start piling up. They basically expect an overworked, unpaid maintainer to now train their employees. So the maintainer tries to ignore the PRs. Community pressure starts building up on those PRs. And the maintainer again goes like, no, I need some money, help me. And people put more people on the projects. This is the road to maintainer burnout. This is the road to a meltdown. Do not be that company. Please, do not be that company. So, now what? You now figure out, okay, this project, this dependency of mine is being abandoned. If you are a company and your company is really dependent on the project, if there are alternatives, you might be able to switch to an alternative. But not all alternatives offer the same feature set. So that might still mean that you need to start contributing to the alternative to make it a feature complete for your kind of use case. At the same time, depending on how involved the dependency is, how much you've built on top of it, it might be so closely connected and woven into your own project that the costs of switching to another project is too high. And so high that it could bankrupt the company. It might be cheaper to then pay someone to become the maintainer, or be either from your own company or hire someone to do it for you, instead of switching to another dependency. And sometimes there just isn't another dependency you could switch to. Well, so if a project is being abandoned, there's a couple of scenarios which can happen. One, a new admin. New admin gets added to an existing project. Everything stays in the same repo, in the same organization. This is the ideal situation. But it isn't always possible. Because if you have a project in your own personal account, you can't add a second admin. It literally is not possible. So then you already get into the second situation, which is you need to transfer the repo to, for instance, a dedicated organization where you can add someone else as an admin. And adding a new admin really isn't always easy. I mean, like the CodeSniffer project was originally in the Squishlabs organization, which is a company. They could give me commit as a guest in the company, but they couldn't give me admin in their company, which makes perfect sense to me. But these are things you need to take into account when you set up an open source project, when it becomes popular, and when you need to look at taking over a project. The third situation is, not great. Someone forks the repo with the blessing of the maintainer. That's basically what happened with CodeSniffer. Why it's not great? You lose all the issues, you lose all the PRs, you lose the wiki, you lose the GitHub pages. Basically, you have the Git history and that's it. And everything else needs to start over. In this case, I've been lucky that I could keep the package's name for the package. But most of the time, the package's name changes as well. And then you basically have to rebuild your complete user base, which can be kind of a chore, especially because other users will be looking like, where do I need to go? The last option is, of course, letting things die completely. Now, you will say, oh, hang on, no, but then someone else will fork it, and then without the blessing of the maintainer, but they'll fork it. Yeah, about 50 people will do that, and nobody knows where to contribute. It will die anyway. So, before we continue, let's have a quick look at what it means to be a maintainer. How many of you maintain open source projects? Okay, about 10%, 20% of the room. Someone wants to give me an answer to this? No? Okay. Nothing ever just works. That's the short of it. Even if a project is feature complete, even if a project is mature and you generally think you don't need to do anything about it, nothing ever just works. Things change, whether it is Travis basically stopping support for open source and you need to move to GitHub Actions, whether Sebastian released a new PHP unit version and you need to update your test suite to comply with it. PHP 8.4 is around the corner, and hang on, okay, we need to get ready. So every time there is something which happens in the ecosystem in which your project runs, which means you need to keep updating. Nothing ever just works. So what does maintaining mean? It means keeping things running. It means unblocking contributors. Making sure that when someone else wants to contribute to your project, the CI can actually pass, which is kind of helpful. So it's not the fun stuff. A lot of the time, it means working through technical depth, writing more tests, making sure the code quality can be guaranteed in ways. It's the grunt work, which people don't associate with, fun, but it is the real work which needs to be done. What is maintaining as well? It is envisioning the future. It is thinking about where do I want to go in a few years' time. I've already got things planned out for PHPCS 4, 5, 6, 7. I haven't published all of it because I don't want to overpromise. Because then you get people like, yeah, but you promised this, yeah, that's going to wait a couple of years. So you don't always inform everyone of all your plans, but you do plan for the future. And you start thinking along the lines of, where does this project need to go? What it does not mean is bug fixes. Oh, bug fixes and new features. Generally, those are open for all. And you want to grow a contributor pool, you want to grow a community to eventually not be the only maintainer. And the way to do that is to make room for others. So anything which is low-hanging fruit, leave it open for others. Don't pick it up yourself. Your role as a maintainer in that is give guidance. Yes, this is something to be worked on, label things. Easy, good first issue, help wanted. But also, yes, this has been triaged, someone can work on this. If someone wants a new feature, it's providing guidance on the architecture, reviewing the PR. It's not actually creating the feature. So yeah, the project still get abandoned. So the way to prevent that is to open up the project to contributors. But not just that. So let's have a look, healthy and unhealthy project. A healthy project, I think most people will recognize this. You have a couple of maintainers, there's a ring of first-line contributors, regular contributors who are involved with the project, you know them by name. And then a ring of occasional contributors, drive-by contributors, and people can freely change between those rings. So a maintainer can say, okay, I want to step back for a while because personal circumstances. And that's fine. And someone else might have gained enough experience to become a maintainer and move from. So people move between the rings. And that's fine. This is a healthy project. An unhealthy project, you have a sole maintainer and maybe a few occasional contributors, and that's it. This is a very risky situation. It's a bus factor of 1. If that one person stops, quits, dies, gets under a bus, whatever, the project dies. So ways to prevent that situation is to do succession management. And this is something which a lot of open source projects do not do because you don't want to think about a situation where you can't do what you love doing. But we do need to start thinking about this more. So what does succession management entail? Document things. Document the processes, document the release process, document how decisions are made. Make it transparent how the project works, what the governance is like. Activate the community by, as I already mentioned, labeling issues, trying to get people to start contributing. Identify candidates for coaching. Candidates, people who could grow into a maintainer role because they either have an aptitude for the project, they get it. Ask them whether they want to be coached. Start coaching them. Try to get them ready to take on a maintainer role at some point. Validate your trust in them. Because let's be fair, executals, that can happen to all of us. In case anyone doesn't know about executals, come and find me after. Promote people, and promote them slowly, but do promote them. Give people a road to becoming a maintainer. And don't forget funding. Because while a lot of idlers like me are suckers, the next generation doesn't do it for free. So whether you need funding at this moment or not, your project will need funding. And I'll come back to that in a moment. So now you've done all that, but then there's still one person with the keys to the castle. So things to take into account, things to make sure that in some way, in a secure way, are shared, are, for instance, access to the repo, admin to the GitHub organization, access to packages, access to domains, to how to change the DNS if needs be, access to admin access to Open Collective if you're raising funds via that. All those things need to be shared in some way. And by the way, if you have open source projects in your personal account, GitHub has a feature which allows you to designate a successor. So if something happens with you, that person will get access to your projects. Please do that. And yes, in case anyone was wondering, yes, I have added a second person as admin to the organization which hosts CodeSniffer at this moment. Because I don't want that risk as well, and I know something could happen. So, things I've learned along the way, and I'm going to let you read this while I drink a little. Now, can someone please explain this to me like I'm a 5-year-old? Open source is not free. The free and open source software was about freedom. It wasn't about money. Open source is not free. Except in most cases, you are not the one paying the price. The maintainer is. Whether it's in money, in time, or mental health, the maintainer is paying the price. And we need to normalize the situation that maintainers actually get paid money. So funding is not optional. You can think, we don't need the funding for our project. Yes, you do. Whether it's for you, whether it's for offsetting costs, whether you want to run a security audit, whether you want to, at some point, have some paid versions of CI tools, whether you need to buy an IDE, everything costs money. So maintainers need to get paid, and it needs to be normalized to fund open source. For those people who are wondering, there's a great initiative, the Open Source Pledge. Please bring it up in your company. Please start that conversation. And I'm not looking to individuals to fund open source. I'm looking to companies to do this. Companies are the ones who are benefiting most from open source software. And not funding open source, there's a name for that. It's called exploitative capitalism. Do not be that company. So, once you've taken over, things to do. First, set up funding channels, and I mean that. Create a dedicated organization because it allows a lot of useful things. On the one hand, as I said, you can add more admins, but also there might be sub-projects. And like for CodeSniffer, we're literally rewriting other people's code. I don't want to give someone admin until I fully validate and trust them. But there might be smaller projects which I'm happy for other people to actually work on and do get admin on. So I can create sub-projects, I can create new repos within that organization and have modular access rights based on which repo it is. This is a useful thing when you're growing your contributor pool. Have a contributor guide. Have a good contributor guide. I mean, for CodeSniffer, it was this. It's now this. I've expanded it a lot. There's a couple of reasons. On the one hand, set expectations. Be transparent about what you expect and how you expect it. It gives people an on-ramp because you give people clues of this is where you can start. But it also sets guidelines of what you don't want. So it validates you when you close issues because of it. One of the things I have, if you want a new feature and you're not sure it's welcome, open an issue. Well, one of the first things which happened when I took over CodeSniffer is a long-standing PR from the original repo got ported over. We want the baseline. Close. And there's a reason for that, because they just had not thought it through. Code Sniffer has a fixer. As soon as you run the fixer, your complete baseline is invalidated. And that wasn't taken into account in how this was designed. If that happened, if I would accept the feature as it was, the amount of support requests for that would be huge, because it does not work like people would expect it to work. Do I want to take on that support burden? No. It needs a better design. So open an issue. Another thing I have in the constructor guide is no AI. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One, it's wrong most of the time. Two, if I explain why it's wrong, the person who used AI to create the PR will not understand me, will then go back to AI, ask the AI to explain what I said, and then I get an AI-generated answer, no. But more importantly, I do not know on what code the AI was trained. I do not know the license of the code. I do not know the copyright of the code. I cannot accept code which was generated by AI because I do not know whether it will conflict with the license of my code. Next up, work with PRs and protected branches. Now, this may seem obvious, and yeah, for external contributors, always do that. But I enforce that for myself as well. Why? Because, again, I want to get people involved. I want to get people to review my PRs, because I might miss something. I want people to be aware of what's going on, what's coming in the future. People don't get notified of pushes to the main branch. They do get notified, if they're watching the repo, about PRs. So I mean, not technical debt things. I mean, I merge those straight away. But anything which is more than technical debt, so a bug fix or a feature, I will leave that PR open even for 3, 4, 5 days to give people the chance to pitch in and say, hey, this is a great idea, this is a crap idea, hang on, you're forgetting that. Give people the chance, give people the room to become involved. Expand CI and QA, especially if you're a sole maintainer. It's the only way to keep you honest. And that might sound, you know, yeah, of course you're using tools, but you know, my tests are passing, that should be enough. No. I also have tools to check my markdown. I have tools to check for broken links in the README. I have tools which, well, PHP Stan, where are you, Andre? There you are. So a lot of tools will complement each other, and it will just keep you honest, because it's too easy to say, you know, I'll just merge it, it'll be fine. And yeah, if nobody else is looking over your shoulder, this is the only way to keep yourself honest. Well, I already mentioned signaling via labels, and another thing is close quickly. There's a lot of nuisance issues which can open duplicates, or support requests. No, that's not an issue. That's user support, and we don't want those in the issue tracker. Close them. And the less noise you have, the better, so you can focus on what's really worth your time and attention. So, things I've learned the hard way. Say no a lot. Seriously, it's not fun having to say no, but it has to be done. And have off GitHub contact. I already mentioned the situation with the Composer installer plugin. This might, yeah, it's difficult to even establish off GitHub contact when when the only way you know people is via GitHub. But especially when you're in a maintainer team, it's important to do so you can sometimes just share things before you want to share them publicly, or you know, discuss things like, are we doing this the right way, whatever. It helps for your own mental health. Stick to your plan. Leave room for additions to the plan. Leave room for others to add to the plan, but stick to your plan. And envision your future and make sure you take the steps to get there. it's too easy to get distracted by everything that comes in on a daily basis, and then in the end nothing gets done. So keep your plan in the back of your mind always. And pace yourself. When Greg told me he was abandoning CodeSniffer, I took a month. I took a month to set up the repo, recreate the wiki, recreate GitHub pages, work out how the hell 5 worked and what I needed to do to release Fire 5, set up the funding platforms, recreate issues, recreate PRs. I took a month until I was ready, and then I announced that I was taking over. It's fine to pace yourself. You can't do everything at the same time. You need to find a way which works for you, and don't let anyone pressure you into, yeah, but it must be done yesterday. No, it does not. Struggles, and these are very personal, and for every maintainer this will be different. One of the things I really struggle with is a slow turnaround on feedback. I generally, depending on the PR, like, yeah, if it's huge, it might take longer, but if it's a small PR, I'll try and give you feedback like within a day. If someone then comes back and updates the PR based on that feedback within that the same day or the next day, I still have the context in my mind. And I can just look at what they've changed and merge. Even if it's a small thing, it takes another month before they come back, I then have to regain the context of that PR, because by that time, I'm 200 PRs further down the line. Whether it's 200 PRs I created or 200 PRs I've reviewed, I'm 200 PRs further down the line. So I have to completely regain that context, and that costs me exponentially more time every time that happens. So for me, this is something I really struggle with. And I can't demand it of other people, but yeah, it's something I find hard to handle, and I need to find a way through that. Another thing, when is good enough? I can't set the same standard to new contributors or drive-by contributors as I set for myself. At the same time, I'm trying to work through technical debt in this repo. I'm trying to diminish the technical debt. So do I want to take on more technical debt if people are introducing it? So when is good enough? And this is something I will probably keep struggling with, and it's okay to keep questioning yourself on things like that. Another thing, it's lonely. It literally is. The buck stops with you. You are responsible. Every decision, how unpopular or popular it is, the buck stops with you. And I know Sebastian knows exactly what I'm talking about here. This is, you. In the end, you are responsible. You alone. And I don't know everything. I've contributed to this code base now for 8 years. I know a lot of it. I've touched most of it. But there are parts which I've never needed to touch. If it's your own code base, it's like an old code. There might be some tears. It might smell funny by now. But when you've not worked on it, you put it back on, and everything about it feels familiar. But when it's someone else's code, that's not the same thing. It's just not. And yeah, there's sometimes not enough context in commit message in history to figure out why something was set up some way. I know there will have been thought behind it. I just don't know what. And it's difficult because you don't want to break things, and yeah. So, for those wondering, CodeSniffer, did it survive? Well, the answer is yes, it did. Now, that's the old repo. This is the new repo. And now you might think like, oh, but the new repo doesn't get that much traction. Look at the scales, please. There's a difference there. So yeah, the first bump there is me working through the backlog, which were unmerged PRs from the old repo. But now it's at a steady, nice pace. And yes, we are working through a lot of backlog, a lot of technical debt. If we then compare these two, the left one is from the moment when I took over. The right one is now. If you see the top ones, those are basically, because I kept the package's name, those numbers are comparable, so everything's still going up. It's still going well there. The other thing, like stars and watchers and forks, that's repo specific. It's a fork, so new repo, so I started from 0. And if you compare the old repo, which had 12 years on GitHub, versus the new repo, 10 months, I don't think I'm doing badly. Room for improvement, but we're getting somewhere. So what has happened? There's a lot of things which has changed. We were behind with CodeSniffer and yeah, with syntax support for PHP 8.2, 8.3. All of that's been fixed. We've had great performance improvements. Test coverage has been up by 8%. It's still not where I want it to be, but at least it's better than it was. And why do I find test coverage so important? It's not my code base. There are parts I haven't touched. Unless I know it's tested, I don't know whether I'm breaking things. So test coverage really needs to go up further. By the way, please do not ask me about syntax support for PHP 8.4. Property hooks is the bane of my existence. Do not talk to me about property hooks. New sniff, we have one new sniff, and why is that significant? It's the first new sniff in 3 years' time. So yeah, that is kind of significant. There's a performance report, so if your PHP CS run is going slow, you can now find out what the slow sniffs are and report them to the maintainers of those projects, because a lot of people use external standards. Might be CodeSniffer, might be some other external standard where you need to report it, but at least you now know which ones need improvement. Ability to deprecate sniffs without failing builds, which is great because that will allow us to signal to people, hang on, you're using sniffs which are going to be removed. It starts changing. This is a good thing. I'm really trying to focus on making things better for users, making it more usable, user-friendly, reducing support requests by providing better information, having a revamped help screen, having better sniff documentation. So I'm still looking for more people to contribute. So the message here, and I hope I've gotten that across, is know your dependencies, contribute to your dependencies, and please, please, please get your companies to start funding your dependencies, because they do all need it. Thank you.
Thank you, Juliette. And we have some people around the room with a microphone. Oh, you're there? Mm-hmm. So we have a short Q&A, and let's see if there are any questions from you.
These lights are really warm, so...
Yeah, we can't really see all the arms who are raised. Nobody.
No questions up?
Oh, there.
Stefan.
First of all, thank you for all that you're doing for the community. Do you... I probably know the answer, but I'm still asking. Do you really think it's worth it?
I do, yeah.
Thank you.
To expand on the I do a little, I'm an old school idealist. I'm an old school open source contributor. When I started using open source, give back was the norm. So even when I didn't know anything about code, if I had a question, for me it was normal to then go through other support questions and see if there was one or two I could answer. That was like the price I paid for asking one. Even when I didn't know code, I would, add a translation to a Firefox plugin or something, and Firefox 0.7 at the time. So for me, give back and contributing to open source it comes naturally, and I know that's no longer the case. People have lost well, it's also open source has grown big. Open source has grown too big. in a way. So the end users now of open source software don't even know what open source is, let alone that they're using it. So that there's a disconnect there now. And that disconnect is dangerous because it endangers open source, but as 90% of all software nowadays is open source. And you know, your bank cards wouldn't work without open source, trains wouldn't run without open source. Do I need to continue? Basically, if open source fails, the world will literally be bankrupt. And that is a problem, and it's a problem we need to start facing together. Does that it? Yeah, okay.
Stefan to give me the mic. I wanted to say something differently, but now I want to add on to what you just said. And in fact, I would really like to skip my planned session and just continue this discussion, but that's just me.
We'll continue this discussion over lunch.
Like a while ago, like 2 or 3 years ago, I read the Working in Public book, which has which cites a couple of studies that the motivation for people to contribute to open source has changed since you and me and others that we know started to work on open source. Yeah. And these days, it's a lot of so-called CV-driven development. Yeah. Because people at some point in time just found out, hey, I have a higher chance of getting hired if I have a GitHub profile and all those bad incentives that come with that. Yep. But now I remember the one thing that I asked the Mike for, like one piece of advice. If you use GitHub's feature to designate a successor for your account, ask the person first.
Oh, totally. 100%, 100%. I mean, for me, that's a given. Thank you for highlighting it for those people where they didn't...
It's happened to me a couple of times
that
I got an email from GitHub. XYZ has designated you as their successor without consulting me first. Like in all of those cases, I know the person and I will gladly be their successor. But it's kind of weird to get it out of the blue.
Sebastian, I totally get it. And just to clarify, yes, I have a second admin in the organization. I asked them in person before I did that. And it's someone who isn't directly involved with the project, but someone I've worked with for 10 years on a related project and who I completely trust. And that's the most important thing. But yes, I totally agree.
Same
Ask.
For me.
Don't do this without permission. I think you had a question here in the front. Yeah.
Thank you very much for the information and for the talk. My question to you is, since you are a moderator yourself, what is something that you see in yourself and many others, successful people in this regard, that they have in common, like maybe a quality or an attribute that you see or you can think of that is essential in becoming a successful at this role?
The question is, how do you define success?
Yeah, that's true.
And that I don't have an answer to because that's personal. Mm. I mean, I've been self-employed for like 22 years now. I've had people say like, you know, I would have a successful year, in my opinion, because I got a lot of work done and I've had a lot of fun doing it. My income was next to zero. It depends on, you know, how do you define success. Others would say like, yeah, but your income needs to be like minimum that before you can call yourself success. It really depends on what's your criteria for success. And for open source projects, if the project is alive and it gains contributors, or doesn't ever have any issues because, you know, it just works, both of those cases can be seen as success. If there's never any issues because there's no users, that's a different situation, of course. But yeah. So how do you define success?
Yeah, I agree with you. Everyone has its own definition of success. Maybe what I mean here is more, for example, in any organization or something, you have a person, and in one of the slides it was also written coachable, coach people, or who are interested. So amongst a group of people who are potentially like to be in that role sometime later, who do you pick, or who do you see, or what are the qualities that you look in those group of people that you can say, yeah, this person looks promising, he or she can become the next successor or something like that?
Well, code sniffer work is quite specialist, so you need a really in-depth understanding of how code works, and then you need an in-depth understanding of the PHP tokenizer. It's pretty straightforward, basically, to pick out whether someone understands what they're doing when they're writing sniffs or not. So if someone has a number of PRs, and every time you can see them have the right reasoning, even if they don't have the right decision yet, they still have, they actually go through the thinking steps the right way, then you know there's someone who is worth investigating if they want to grow in this field. But for every project, those criteria will be different again as well.
Thank you very much.
So are there any other questions, I think?
One more?
This one?
Nobody at the back? All the questions are at the front, eh?
Yeah, I think we have very very much time. That's the right word.
That's true. So we'll
for
be quick.
for the talks in parallel.
Yeah.
Okay, my question is a little bit like a teeny. All your staff for me when you are contribute, maintain open source project, and how can I give it together to earn the money for my family and to maintain open source project? I can see the way for me to do so. Do you have a tip for me?
Well, no, because I struggled financially for 18 years myself. And I don't have a family, which allowed me to struggle because I was only involved financially for myself. In some ways, the fact that I took over CodeSniffer and actually took that month to get up funding platforms and everything. And when I took over, in that message, I literally said, it needs funding. I cannot do this without funding. And that's been good, that was helpful. But it's also, and this is very slow work of gaining reputation in a way. I mean, aside from CodeSniffer, I work on other open source projects, and PHP unit polyfills is paid. That's paid by a company who has a huge stake in the fact that I maintain that. If I contribute to WordPress, that's paid because they value, they've seen over the years what I mean to, well, what my contributions mean to WordPress. So some companies have now stepped up and said, if you contribute, we pay for it. But that is years and years of investment. And I know that is not something which most people can do. Like you said, with financial obligations for a family.
Maybe we can find a company to get the money for the open source project.
Well, this is exactly why I want to normalize the conversation about funding open source. The fact that I had to invest 18 years of my life to get to where I am now is insane. So we need to normalize funding open source. This should not be a question. It should be a given that people get paid for the work they do.
So I guess we have very, very many points to continue the talk.
During lunch.
Grab a coffee and ask Juliette. I think you are around the whole of the day, so plenty of time for you to get into those points again. And we will have a short break, 50 minutes. Oh, thank you for this one.